I'm Aaron Mate, sitting in for Jimmy Dore, here with my guest, Norman Finklestein, author of the new book, I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It. And this happened recently where Mehdi Hassan, a host on MSNBC, claimed that he had caught Matt Taibbi, the reporter on the Twitter files, in what Mehdi called multiple unacknowledged and glaring mistakes in his Twitter files reporting. And Mehdi claimed that he caught Matt Taibbi in these errors in an interview they did on MSNBC.
Come back in. You also claim the EIP was partnered with the government cybersecurity and infrastructure agency, CISA, to censor Twitter. But you mix up CISA, CISA, a Homeland Security agency, with the Center for Internet Security, the CIS, which is a non-profit. In fact, you added an A to CIS. I think people can see it there in brackets to make that false claim. It's just error after error, Matt.
So that's Mehdi Hassan claiming he's caught Matt Taibbi in error after error. And in that case, he caught Matt Taibbi getting an acronym wrong in one tweet, but then falsely claimed that Matt Taibbi had made that same mistake before Congress, which he did not. And someone to point all this out was Li Fang, who reported, and we've covered this, that MSNBC's Mehdi Hassan gets basic facts wrong on DHS content moderation partnerships. So the claims that Mehdi was making about Matt Taibbi's supposed mistakes, that yes, in one tweet, Matt got an acronym wrong, but on the substance of the rest, it was Mehdi that in fact got it wrong. But that didn't stop Congress, Democrats in Congress, based on Mehdi's mistake, threatening Matt Taibbi with prison. Here's a headline from Li Fang: House Democrat threatens Twitter files journalist with prosecution and imprisonment. And then Li Fang came out with more reporting showing that while Mehdi Hassan is lecturing Matt Taibbi about making mistakes, that Mehdi Hassan actually plagiarized the column he wrote in favor of spanking. Now, many people were quick to point out that Mehdi Hassan has a history of this, of positioning himself on the left only to attack other people on the left or other people who do actual adversarial journalism that holds state power accountable. Here's Ali Abunimah. He points out it's important to understand that Mehdi's consistent game is attacking the left from the left to advance his career, like when he offered himself to the rancid, ultra-racist Daily Mail to attack labor and shit on Muslims. And yes, this was back when Mehdi Hassan wrote the Daily Mail, which is a right-wing newspaper in the UK, and asked them to give him a column, and offered in that letter, he said, quote, I could therefore write pieces for the Daily Mail critical of labor and the left from inside labor and the left. So that's Mehdi Hassan's background, and his record of attacking the left and catering to right-wing establishment talking points in service of his own career also includes catering to the smear that was waged against Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, an actual progressive, longtime champion of working people and of a humane foreign policy. And to undermine Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party establishment, along with the pro-Israel lobby in the UK, came up with this scam that Corbyn was an anti-Semite and was presiding over this anti-Semitism crisis inside the Labour Party. And here's Mehdi Hassan from the left catering to that. He says, I gave Corbyn the benefit of the doubt on anti-Semitism. I gave Corbyn the benefit of the doubt on anti-Semitism. I can't anymore. A powerful piece from this writer who, like me, has defended Corbyn up until now, but like me, struggles to defend his Zionist remarks that have emerged from 2013. And Mehdi Hassan also wrote a column in Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, ostensibly trying to tell people that the thing about Corbyn was going too far, it was overblown. In the process, though, he still caters to it. So the column is called Dial Down the Hysteria on Anti-Semitism in Corbyn's Labor. So ostensibly, he's actually arguing here that this allegation of anti-Semitism is overblown. But here he is, if you read the column, actually catering to it, accepting all of the fake talking points that are used to advance it. So this is what he writes. Does Corbyn suffer from an unconscious bias on the left that doesn't take allegations of anti-Semitism as seriously as it takes allegations of, say, Islamophobia? Probably. So here he is saying that Jeremy Corbyn probably suffers from an unconscious bias that downplays anti-Semitism while he's ostensibly defending Corbyn. Could Corbyn have been more forceful and proactive in denouncing left-wing anti-Semitism much earlier on? Definitely. But does a Corbyn-led Labour government pose a threat to the very existence of British Jewry? Don't be silly. So yes, here he is trying to push back a little bit, but still catering to the premise in the first place, which is fake, that there is this anti-Semitism problem in the Labour Party and that Jeremy Corbyn has some personal problems, some personal blind spot with that. And then he also says, when Jews say they're the victims of racism, believe them. So here's Mehdi Hassan in an Israeli newspaper saying that when Jews say they're the victims of racism, believe them. So basically, anybody who says that Jeremy Corbyn is a anti-Semite and a racist, I guess we have to believe them when they say that because they said it and because they're Jews. And he also writes, meanwhile, whether it likes it or not, Labour, to paraphrase the Corbyn-supporting musician and activist Billy Bragg, has much work to do in terms of rebuilding relations with Britain's Jewish community. Corbyn's repeated apologies in recent months have so far failed to heal the wounds of the past few years. So let's bring in our guest, Norman Finklestein. Norman, you've written extensively about the weaponization of anti-Semitism to undermine criticism of Israel. And so what do you make here of Mehdi Hassan, ostensibly in the name of defending Jeremy Corbyn from these allegations of anti-Semitism, still pandering to those very same allegations?
If you don't mind, I want to just first comment on the first part of what you said, and I'm going to focus on the second part, namely what Mehdi Hassan did in the case of the Corbyn candidacy in the UK. Everybody knows it's just the most standard debating trick that when you have only two pieces of evidence for your point, for example, you charge a book is filled with fraud, rife with lies, so on and so forth. You say, but for reasons of time or for reasons of space, I can only discuss two of those pieces of evidence, okay? Now, when you're a writer like myself, who constantly makes claims against establishment figures, I always stay up nights, literally, worrying. If they find those two errors, I'm going to be hung. Because all they have to say is Finkelstein's book is rife with errors, filled with errors. However, for reasons of time, if it's oral, or space, if it's written, for reasons of time or space, I can only discuss two. And that's exactly what Mehdi Hassan did with Matt Taibbi. He said error after error after error, and then he cites two or three so-called errors, but planting the idea that Taibbi's, all of his reportage was rife with error. So on Glenn Greenwald's show, I made what I thought to be a fair challenge. Present this voluminous evidence of fraud in Taibbi, or acknowledge that you're a blowhard. When I was on Democracy Now! Debating Alan Dershowitz, I made very severe accusations against him of fraud, falsification, etc. The same claims that Mehdi Hassan leveled against Matt Taibbi. But here's the difference. I recognize that's a serious accusation. It's a serious professional accusation, and it's a personal libel. So when I left the Democracy Now! Studio, I sat down and devoted the next 2 years to documenting in detail the various frauds, falsifications, and lies in Alan Dershowitz's book, The Case for Israel. And it seems to me incumbent upon Mehdi Hassan to do the exact same thing. That was a professional slander and a personal libel against Matt Taibbi. The error after error after error will now put up, or not just shut up, but issue a public apology. Number two, you mentioned the she's not a voting congressman, non-voting congresswoman from the Virgin Islands, who brought up the issue of perjury and legal consequences of it. I think you forgot, I could be mistaken, but my memory is that idea was first planted by Mehdi Hassan, and then it was taken
Correct.
up.
He said, he tweeted that Matt Taibbi made false statements under oath, and he called for Congress to take action on that. And by the way, after this member of Congress, Stacey Plaskett, a Democrat, threatened Taibbi with prison, I've yet to see Mehdi Hassan comment on that. He was very vocal in talking about how many mistakes he caught Matt Taibbi on, supposedly and erroneously, because that was not true that he caught him on mistakes. Very vocal about getting Congress to do something. After Congress threatened Taibbi with prison based on Mehdi's own mistake, he's gone quiet.
That shows you what a sewer rat he is. And I'll tell you why. You're too young, obviously, to remember and probably haven't even read about it. During the McCarthy era, when people were brought before McCarthy, ex-communists were brought before McCarthy, there was a real moral dilemma. And here was the moral dilemma. Many people were willing to speak on their own politics and their own participation in the Communist Party. The problem was the rules of the game in the congressional hearings was the moment you spoke about yourself, you were legally bound to talk about others. And a lot of the people who went before McCarthy didn't want to have to talk about others being in the Communist Party because it would have seemed like betrayal and a stab in the back. And that was the reason why, many of them pleaded the Fifth Amendment. And the Fifth Amendment is you don't have to testify against yourself. The problem was they were willing to testify about themselves, but they weren't willing to testify about others. And only the low life, the Elia Kazans, happily went before McCarthy to rat on others. And this was Mehdi Hassan, the rat, the sewer rat, who writes a column, we need to get Matt Taibbi arrested. We need to get Matt Taibbi on a perjury charge. It's such a lowlife. He was so proud of himself because after that exchange with Matt Taibbi, he became the woke avenger. The whole net was saturated with how Mehdi Hassan had pummeled, destroyed Matt Taibbi. And Mehdi got so carried away with his fame, he got so intoxicated by it, he decided to raise it to another level. And so he says, let's lock up Matt Taibbi. Why not burn him, Mehdi? Why not burn him like the witches? Don't you think that would even be better, more exciting? You woke, you sewer rat, woke avenger. It was so disgusting. The saddest part is Matt Taibbi was such a nice guy. He was so principled and decent that he really didn't fight back hard against Mehdi and tell him to his face what a sack of shit, what a sewer rat he is.
Okay, well, Norman, let me get your response to people like Mehdi Hassan catering to these smears against Jeremy Corbyn while ostensibly criticizing them.
Okay. First of all, you have to have the context. You got the context right. Jeremy Corbyn was like Bernie Sanders, except you could say at a more intense level. Jeremy Corbyn became head of the Labour Party, my memory serves, in 2015. And from the moment he became the head of the Labour Party, a hysteria was whipped up to try to stop him, to smear him. There were claims that he had these ties with Moscow, which are familiar to you, I know. Claims that he had ties with the Russians, blah, blah, blah. And the East Germans, they tried everything. Get something to stick in order to stop Jeremy Corbyn. And finally, they found it. They found the charge of anti-Semitism. Now, the British Board of Deputies, it's the main Jewish body in the UK. It's like our Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations. They have the Jewish Board of Deputies. They were obviously, like our Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, fanatically pro-Israel. They're basically, in one aspect, I'm not talking about the domestic aspect, in one aspect, they're basically an Israel lobby in the UK. And they started this campaign beginning with accusing Corbyn of being soft on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, it gradually escalated until the claim was that Corbyn himself was an anti-Semite.
And Norman, we have 1 minute left to wrap.
Right. And then along came Mehdi Hassan, who reiterated exactly the same pace. He started out by saying the Labour Party is riddled with anti-Semites, and then it culminated in him claiming the Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn himself, was an anti-Semite. And then he wrote the article in Haaretz, and he had that line, which I'll just repeat for you. The line was, just give me 1/2 second. Okay.
Yeah.
The line was, when Jews say they're the victims of racism, believe them. Okay. So every time Israel engages in one of its attacks on Gaza, Israel supports the attack, and 90% of Jews say the attack was warranted. Every single attack on Gaza, the polls showed between 90 and 95% of Jews in Israel said the attack was warranted. So I asked Mehdi Hassan, should we trust the Jews? Now, who do we mean by the Jews? Is it Benjamin Netanyahu? After all, he's the prime minister of the state of the Jews. So Mehdi, I'm asking you, should we trust Benjamin Netanyahu? He's the prime minister of the state of the Jews. Now I have a third question. A large number of those claiming that there was no anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, a large number were Jews. And those Jews were expelled from the Labour Party. Now bear in mind, Jews, it's a very funny thing. Under the current Labour Party head, Keir Starmer, Jews were disproportionately, listen to that, disproportionately expelled from the Labour Party for saying all these claims of anti-Semitism are a crock.
Right.
Now I ask Mehdi, why don't you trust those Jews?
Right.
Why do you only trust the Jews who were part and parcel of a conspiracy? Yes, it was a conspiracy to stop Jeremy Corbyn, and they all coalesced. There was one moment which Mehdi himself cites, where all three major Jewish newspapers in the UK, they combined. It was the first time in their history. All three carried the same headline: is Jeremy Corbyn an existential threat to the Jews? But you're not allowed to say there's any Jewish conspiracy because that's an anti-Semitic taboo. Well, guess what? If you read Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, you know what he says? He says every once in a while capitalists get together, and you know what they do? He says they conspire. Yes, people conspire.
Right.
Not every conspiracy theory is crackpot. In this case, and it'll allow me, and I'm off and you're off, just read Jamie Stern Weiner's edited collection. It's called Anti-Semitism and the Labour Party. It's available from Verso Books. Anti-Semitism and the Labour Party. And it goes through chapter and verse on that whole scandal, which was a complete and total fraud, but which Mehdi joined in for the same reason that Ta-Nehisi Coates, Angela Davis, Kimberly Crenshaw, they joined in the attack on Bernie Sanders. That's their job.
Right.
That's why Mehdi ended up at MSNBC News.
Right.
That's his job.
Norman Finklestein is the author of the new book, I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It. Heretical thoughts on identity politics, cancel culture, and academic freedom. Norman, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
We're telling jokes in Nashville, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Baltimore, Chicago, Rosemont, San Diego, and more. Go to jimmydore.com to get a link for all those tickets. Plus, you can watch my new special, COVID Lies Are Funny.